Terry Thomas, born Thomas Terry Hoare Stevens on July 10, 1911, was more than just a name in the credits of countless British comedies. He was an icon, a symbol of a certain type of Englishness that combined debonair style with a deliciously wicked sense of humor. With his signature gap-toothed grin, impeccable sartorial elegance, and the ever-present monocle, Terry Thomas became one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment during the golden age of British cinema. His laugh-inducing performances brought joy to millions, but behind the facade of the charming cad was a man whose life was marked by highs of extraordinary success and lows of personal tragedy. Thomas Terry Hoare Stevens was born into a comfortable, middle-class family in Finchley, North London. His early life, while not particularly remarkable, was defined by a desire to stand out and entertain. Even as a child, Thomas exhibited a knack for mimicry and comedy, often delighting his classmates with impressions and exaggerated antics. Despite his natural talent, his parents envisioned a more conventional future for him, far removed from the uncertainties of show business. This tension between his passion for performance and his family's expectations would shape much of his early life. After a less than stellar academic career at Ardingly College, where he struggled to conform to the rigid expectations of the time, Thomas decided to carve out a career in entertainment, much to his parents' dismay. He initially worked in various odd jobs, including a stint as a clerk and a drummer in a jazz band. But it was his performances in London nightclubs that began to earn him recognition. The young entertainer quickly developed a unique style, an exaggerated, upper-class persona that combined wit, charm, and just the right amount of arrogance. This character would later become the hallmark of his film career. The outbreak of World War II offered Terry Thomas an unexpected opportunity to hone his craft. Like many entertainers of his generation, he joined the Entertainment's National Service Association (ENSA), performing for British troops stationed around the world. His quick wit and ability to lift spirits made him a favorite among the soldiers, and it wasn't long before he became one of ENSA's most popular performers. The war years were pivotal for Terry Thomas, not just because they allowed him to develop his comedic style, but also because they introduced him to a much wider audience. His reputation grew, and by the time the war ended, he was well positioned to make the leap to radio and film. The post-war years were a boom time for British cinema, and Terry Thomas was at the forefront of this golden age. His big-screen debut came in the late 1940s, but it was in the 1950s that he truly became a star. Films like Private's Progress, 1956, Blue Murder at St. Trinian's, 1957, and Am All Right Jack, 1959, showcased his unique ability to portray the quintessential British cad, a character who was equal parts charming and unscrupulous. Terry Thomas's appeal lay in his ability to make the audience root for him, even as he played characters with dubious morals. His performances were a masterclass in comedic timing, with every raised eyebrow, every sardonic quip delivered with perfect precision. His on-screen persona, a combination of suave sophistication and rakish mischief, became so popular that it often overshadowed the man himself. One of his most celebrated roles was in School for Scoundrels, 1960, where he played Raymond Delaunay, a cad of the highest order. The film was a critical and commercial success, and Terry Thomas's portrayal of Delaunay remains one of the definitive performances of his career. The character was a perfect distillation of everything that made Terry Thomas a star: the wit, the charm, the slightly sinister edge, all delivered with impeccable style. By the early 1960s, Terry Thomas had become a household name in Britain, and it wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. His distinctive style and unmistakably British persona made him a natural fit for the American film industry, which was eager to capitalize on the success of British exports like the James Bond films. Terry Thomas's first major Hollywood role was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, 1963, a sprawling epic comedy that featured a veritable who's who of comedic talent. His performance as the conniving J. Algernon Hawthorne introduced him to American audiences, and he quickly became a sought-after actor in Hollywood. His roles in films like How to Murder Your Wife, 1965, and The Perils of Pauline, 1967, further cemented his status as an international star. Despite his success in America, Terry Thomas remained deeply British in both his public and private life. He was known for his impeccable taste in clothing. His wardrobe was filled with tailor-made suits, cravats, and, of course, his signature monocle. He was also a car enthusiast, often seen driving his beloved Rolls-Royce around the streets of London. With fame came fortune, and Terry Thomas embraced the trappings of success with gusto. He lived a life of luxury, with a penchant for fine dining, lavish parties, and expensive hobbies. His homes were filled with antiques and artworks, and he was a regular fixture at London's most exclusive clubs and restaurants. However, this extravagant lifestyle came at a cost. Terry Thomas's spending habits were as flamboyant as his on-screen persona, and he quickly developed a reputation for living beyond his means. Friends and colleagues would later recall his generosity, but also his inability to manage his finances. Despite the success of his films, Terry Thomas was often in debt, and his financial troubles would haunt him for the rest of his life. By the late 1960s, the landscape of British and American cinema was changing. The rise of new comedic styles, epitomized by the emergence of the Monty Python team and the shift towards more countercultural, irreverent humor, meant that Terry Thomas's brand of comedy was beginning to fall out of favor. The roles that had once come easily began to dry up, and he found himself struggling to adapt to the changing tastes of the industry. As offers dwindled, so did Terry Thomas's income. His lavish lifestyle, once supported by a steady stream of film roles, became increasingly unsustainable. Financial pressures mounted, and he was forced to sell off many of his prized possessions, including his beloved Rolls-Royce. The man who had once epitomized the image of the suave, successful entertainer was now facing the harsh realities of an industry that had moved on. In the late 1970s, Terry Thomas received a diagnosis that would change his life forever: Parkinson's disease. The illness, which affects the nervous system and leads to tremors, stiffness, and difficulties with movement, was a devastating blow to a man whose career depended on his physicality and expressiveness. For an actor who had built his reputation on his ability to control every nuance of his performance, the diagnosis was a cruel twist of fate. As the disease progressed, Terry Thomas found it increasingly difficult to work. His once flamboyant persona was gradually replaced by frailty, and he began to withdraw from public life. His last film role was in the last remake of Beau Geste, 1977, where his declining health was already evident. The man who had once been the life of the party was now struggling with the simplest of tasks, and his world began to shrink around him. The impact of Parkinson's on Terry Thomas's life was profound. The disease not only robbed him of his ability to perform but also plunged him into financial ruin. Without a steady income, and with mounting medical bills, Terry Thomas and his wife, Belinda, were forced to sell their home and many of their possessions. The couple moved to a modest apartment in Ibiza, where they lived in near poverty. The contrast between his earlier life of luxury and his final years of hardship could not have been starker. Terry Thomas's final years were marked by isolation and increasing dependence on his wife, Belinda, who cared for him as his condition worsened. The man who had once been the epitome of style and sophistication was now largely confined to his home, struggling with the debilitating effects of Parkinson's. His physical decline was accompanied by the emotional toll of losing his independence and the career that had defined his life. In 1984, Terry Thomas's plight became public knowledge, and a benefit concert was organized by his friends and colleagues to raise money for his care. The event, which featured performances by some of Britain's top entertainers, was a poignant reminder of the affection and respect that Terry Thomas still commanded in the industry. The money raised provided some financial relief, but it was only a temporary respite from the ongoing struggles he and Belinda faced. Despite the hardships, Belinda remained devoted to Terry Thomas, providing him with the care and companionship he so desperately needed. The couple's love for each other was evident to all who knew them, and it was Belinda's strength and support that sustained Terry Thomas during his final years. On January 8, 1990, Terry Thomas passed away at the age of 78. His death marked the end of an era in British comedy, and he was mourned by fans and colleagues alike. His legacy as one of the greatest comic actors of his generation was secure, but his life story remains a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of fame and the challenges that can accompany even the most successful